pull up my notes here. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a second. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good to see you all. So tonight is part 3 of our 3-part training series. And we'll be talking about interpretation and translation. So a couple of housekeeping things first. So I'm Jen White. I'm the founder and executive director of Arise Immigration Services. And as you probably all know at this point, we provide pro bono legal services to immigrants here in Pittsburgh. We focus on asylum, and we work right now exclusively with Afghan folks. All of our clients are from Afghanistan. And we also provide training and mentoring to advocates around the country. So our model is that we work on our real cases together with folks that want to learn the legal skills so they can do this in their own communities. So it's kind of like a law school clinic, except that we're not exclusive to lawyers. So this training series spiraled out of our work that we do because everything's fast-paced when you're doing legal services, especially in an immigration context. So we wanted to take a step back and kind of dive into these topics. So tonight, I'm very much looking forward to this session because I've been to a ton of trainings that involve working with translators, interpreters, but never from the perspective of the actual interpreter. And I think that's really valuable because during an interview, the interpreter really carries the weight, in my opinion, of the interview, because they're communicating from both sides, right? From the legal advocate and from the client. So I think this will be really valuable. If you want a certificate of attendance for tonight, which is valuable if you're applying for DOJ accreditation, shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat in just a second and I'll send that to you. So I will let our speakers introduce themselves. And just one thing to think about as they're talking is that they translate and interpret very different languages from very different parts of the world. So I think their perspectives are super valuable in that context, because I have found as an advocate that working with an interpreter from one region of the world can be vastly different than another region of the world. So if you both, what I'm trying to say is if you both like contradict each other, that is kind of to be expected, like, and that's valid because your experiences would be very different. So, Veronica, let's start with you. Can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Sure. I'm Veronica Reinhagen, and I am a volunteer in Jen White's team at Arise Immigration Services, where I assist mostly on Afghan cases, but I work with other organizations mainly as a translator and an interpreter, and I speak 5 languages. I translate mainly in 3. So I speak, of course, Spanish, English, Italian, French, and Portuguese. And I translate Spanish, English, English, Spanish, and do translations in French, aside from translations from Spanish. I finished Vista in 2023. And before I started Vista, I started translating in order to get into volunteering in this field. And I'm still doing it for fewer organizations, but I'm still doing it. So I enjoy it very much. That's it.
Great, thanks, Vero. Okay, Najib, you're up.
Thank you so much. So I would like to share a little bit notes. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. It is an honor that I'm here to share my experiences. My name is Najibullah Sadiqi. I arrived to the United States in September 2022. I have BA in English Literature and also MA in Linguistics from India. I worked back in Afghanistan with a non-profit international organization as a multilingual education specialist, trainer, and government relation liaison for about 10 years. And right now, and after that, when we were evacuated to United Arab Emirates, I was exposed to the Afghan immigrants for 10 months. So I was the contact person, to how to interpret and solve their daily problems and documents with the host country and also with the US Embassy. And right now I work with USCRI, US Committee for Refugee and Immigrants, as a post-resettlement behavioral health program officer for PA. Yeah, as we are sharing our information about interpretation or translation in a very important field, the legal system in the United States is completely different from Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the central government was not very strong, or they were not able to implement all the law or the constitution to its citizen, and also the unrest. It was a little bit taking time, and mostly in the 40 years, when the Russian tried to invade Afghanistan, and there were not mechanism to rebuild the legal system and with other educational system. So there were the local mediator, the local council. So mostly when there were problems, the local elders were the people that they were mediating and solving this problem. So as I work right now with the Afghan community in PA, so it will be good to have in mind that their mindset is still a little bit from Afghanistan context or environment. And one thing else, mostly the parents or the older generation, they are from the military background, and they didn't have the chance there to go to school, so they don't know Pashto and Dari, which are the national languages. And it needs to be described to them. And I bring an example here in the United States. If a minor don't or doesn't go to school consistently, so the parents are responsible that they have to answer, or they have to go to the court and tell what was the problem if there is not legitimate excuses. But in Afghanistan, it was not like that. Okay, as I said, the Afghanistan is very far away. Ms. Jen also mentioned, Ms. Veronica is from the different port, and Afghanistan is 10,000 kilometers away from the United States. So the language is completely different, and the parents, only the father is the breadwinner. He is working outside the house, and the women are at home. And housing here, paying bills, and don't give them a chance to help their kids, like in their homeworks or other way, or the parenting style in the United States, it is different. It is fast-paced, and most Afghan how many kids, so it itself like bring pressure and distresses on the parents. So like my purpose is this, that so when we are dealing with the Afghan immigrants, we have to know that all those situation that they will be they are going through, so we have to see and then like judge them, or we have to communicate the current, like the United States law. Okay, so if you do like this, this will be the result. So if you do this, this will be a better way. And also here in Afghanistan, we didn't have like a credit system. You know, if someone do something bad, and there is no like law, or they don't go, they will ignore it. But here, you know, if someone do bad things, their credit will be bad. So they have to understand, and like the background clearance and these things, and how important it is in daily life. In addition of all their daily problems, most of them live in an uncertain situation. So they came here, so many of them applied for asylum, but it is taking a long time. So it is like 1-2 processes, but they don't know, as I said, they don't know the legal system here, and most of them don't have education. So it will be good to communicate this to them, that okay, you have to be patient, how the legal system work here. Yeah, so these are all like my yeah, perception, what I learned, that what are like the Afghan resident on or going through, or what are the main causes that they are like have concern or depression or distresses. So we will go. That is all for right now from my side.
Perfect. Thank you, Najib. And thank you, Vero. So, Najib, that was helpful for a lot of reasons, one of which is, so I've worked with Najib. He's interpreted for a number of cases for us, and he's been very helpful at giving me background information, sometimes in the middle of an interview, so that I can perfect my questioning and so that it will actually make sense to the client. And that's really valuable if you have an interpreter that has in-country experience and knowledge, particularly in this kind of situation where there was a collapse of an entire country. Super valuable. I welcome that. It's stylistic. Some legal advocates don't like to get into that. They want to have their questions translated verbatim, and they don't want to have the back and forth. But for me personally, it's been very helpful to get feedback from interpreters so that I can better communicate with my client. So what we'll do from here is, Najib, if you don't mind stopping the share of your screen, we'll get into a couple questions that I've been asked from all of you. We'll ask Vero and Najib.
Yeah.
Do you need a
Sorry,
hand
can you
with
still
that?
see it? Can you still see it?
Yes, I might be able to.
Okay, please. So
properly.
I'm new to.
Okay. Okay, I think we're good. Great. So what we'll do is we'll ask Vero and Najib some questions from all of you to hear their perspective. And then at the end, I'll give a couple of examples of like directions that you can give interpreters before you work with them, just so you have a starting point as you launch into this yourself. So I'll pull up the list of questions here. So Vero, we'll start with you. So is it important to provide background information to the interpreter before the interview with the client?
Yes, 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 please. So one of the things that Vista was great at was preparing advocates to work with interpreters. But once I was out in the field, I was surprised at how many, in my case, in translating from Spanish, how unusual it was for lawyers to give me background on the case. So quite often I have to reach out to them and ask them what type of case it is, where the people are from. And so basically what's happening is that the attorneys are not vetting the interpreters. And that is a problem because there's a lot of variety when it comes to Spanish. Also, people make the assumption that because a client is from a Spanish country, that Spanish is their first language. And quite often that is not the case. And because of stigma that's attached to certain groups, they are unlikely to tell you that. But as an interpreter, you will pick up on it right away. And you will also pick up if you're asking a question in Spanish and they're not understanding it. So I think it's really important to provide that background, precisely where in a country the client is from, and what type of a case it is. A lot of the interpreters, they're qualified, but they're not certified. And so there's some people work in the legal field, some people work in the medical field, some people work in the literary field. And that interpreter, even though, the intentions are good, may not be the right fit for the case, especially when you have clients that have trauma, and many of them do. They might not be the right fit for you. So yeah, I'm surprised at, more often than not, information is not given to me about the client. So I appreciate you doing this today to see if we can change that.
Yeah, it's easy to forget, honestly, when you're juggling a lot of things,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So Najib, what do you think? Is it helpful for you to receive background information before you do interpretation?
Yeah, as Ms. Veronica mentioned, I think it is very important that the interpreter understand the background information. Like it will be very good that they know the legal terminology and in both languages and also in Pashto, one of our national languages, it has many varieties. So it will be good that the interpreter write all those expected questions or in advance. He has to be proficient in that. And yeah, and it will be very good that they understand the spirit of the courtroom, or even like the legal law, like when they are dealing with the issue. It will be very good to communicate accurately, clearly, and to the point. And another thing is like it will be very good to have a demo interview like we did with Selab. So before that, we were sending him to his asylum, that you were sending him to asylum interview. So it will be really good that one of like your advocate or a lawyer ask those questions, those possible or potential questions that they will be faced with. And so it will give both confidence to the client and also to the advocate. There he will be like feel trustworthy and confidence that okay, if he faces this question, it will be answered. Yeah.
Yeah, what Najib's talking about is mooting with a client before their adjudication, whether that's a hearing in court or an asylum office interview. And ideally, if you can moot with the same interpreter that will be there during the asylum office interview, you don't have control over the court interpreter, but that familiarity is helpful. Go ahead, Vero.
Yeah, I think that is a great, that's a great idea too. Also, like you said, some attorneys appreciate you giving them extra information, and a heads up about if they're detecting something. And some of them are very straight to the point and don't want any of that. It's also a good opportunity to see if the interpreter wants to work with you. After doing this a lot, I've learned that in certain cases, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So I think it's important, especially if there are no considerations and you're dealing with trauma. People have other jobs. So that was a good thing that Jen mentioned last week. You have to, if there's trauma involved, it's considerate from the attorney to let the interpreter know, because you're in the midst of either teaching or working or whatever, and you take some time to do this, and you're interpreting some difficult stuff, and then you have to get back to business as usual. And you're a human being, you're not just a tool. So but going back to what Najib was saying about the context and the variations that there are, I grabbed some numbers because Spanish seems to be a dime a dozen, and it's really not. And so, for example, the Mexican government recognizes 68 linguistic groups and 364 varieties of indigenous languages, including Nahuatl, Purépecha, etc. There are also 25 languages spoken in Guatemala alone. Spanish is the official language in most spoken languages. In addition, there are 22 Mayan languages, as well as two other indigenous languages like Garifuna and Xinca. So, and that's just two countries. And again, quite often, because of the stigma attached to it, if you say, do you need somebody, or I've asked this question, do you belong to an ethnic group that speaks a different language? They will say no. But if you pick up on it and you can get more information, perhaps you can get a better match for somebody to translate. If nothing else, somebody from Mexico that might have a better ear for those specific things. Also, the power structures are different from country to country. Another thing that I notice in reading when I can, the original declarations is that sometimes those are really bad, and the translations are really bad. Recently, for example, I was trying to get some examples here. For example, somebody said something about the girl was provocando, right? Typically, this means provoking, provoking in front of the police, right? So there was a lot of time and energy given around the fact that this girl was provoking. Well, provoking, what she meant was throwing up. She got nervous, and so it had nothing to do with what anybody was thinking about. Another one, most recently, in the original declaration, the client was one semester from graduating to as an attorney in his country. So there was this assumption that that he was almost a lawyer. And in the original declaration, it said that one of his jobs, because he was seeking asylum because of political opinion, was that he was a prosecutor. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, how can it be a prosecutor if he's not a lawyer? And I know things are different, but I kept on questioning it. And it turns out that he was un fiscal. Fiscal is a prosecutor, but he was fiscal de mesa. And that is a ballot inspector. It is not just a prosecutor. So those are some of the things, you know, with language, and like Najib said, taking notes about the terms. If I see somebody that doesn't have now pencil and paper and they're translating or they're interpreting, that's a red flag, for example, for me, because I know those things pop up. So
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought to look for that paper and pencil, but I think you're absolutely right.
yeah, I mean, if only to keep track of the story, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in trauma where they go back and forth, back and forth. I mean, you have to know the track of the story, otherwise you're just doing a poor job.
Right. Very helpful. So aside from getting background information from the legal advocate, what else can we do to make your work easier? Oh,
Najib?
sorry. Go ahead, Najib.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. So aside from giving you background information like before we start the interview, what else can we as legal advocates do to make your job easier as an interpreter?
Yeah, I think it making the situation comfortable for the clients, as Ms. Veronica and you both mentioned that these newcomers, they went through many trauma, even for me, like I was exposed to a little bit to the Western culture, and I knew English. It was very difficult for me, like in the first 6 months, that I was not able to drive very comfortably. Even all the cars were looking very fast for me. So, and for those that they don't know the language, and when they go to the court or they go to the uh, government offices and they faced with a formal question, so they will lose their confidence and they will be like very nervous to respond that. Yeah, so I'm coming back, like if it is trained a little bit, or have a demo interview with them, it will help them to have the confidence and express themselves when they are like faced with such questions. Yeah.
Vera, what do you think?
I think, you know, the one thing I think that everybody in my experience does well is that they do speak in chunks of, you know, 2 to 3 sentences to make the process easier. The other thing that I think would be useful, and again, it's a matter of looking at the interpreter, the interpretation experience as an important component and not just a tool, is to schedule the interpretation and schedule breaks. At the beginning, you know, the attorney tends to say, okay, if you need to stop, if you feel, more often than not, people won't feel comfortable asking for a break or whatever. So, you know, so perhaps have a loose agenda and say, okay, you know, we cover these things at the very beginning, how it's going to go, and also set the tone for the expectations that you have the interpreter, please interpret, you know, in the first person and all of these things. But also, we will stop at this time to take a break. We will stop again, if only for 5 minutes. I think it's good for everybody to decompress, gather themselves, and move, because it can be intense as it is, and it's stressful to do it with the added element of having, you know, a third person translating there.
Okay, so Vera, there's a question in the chat that I think is good for you. And I know that some of this is kind of location specific, but where is the best place to search for an appropriate interpreter to match your client?
You'd probably be better. You know, I work for specific organizations, so they find me there. What I can tell you is, I mean, the elephant in the room is that there aren't enough translators. I was trying to find some numbers in the East Coast, but I was able to find that in California, for example, there's a shortage everywhere of Spanish ones specifically. But for example, qualified ones. And there's the thing about certified and qualified, right? Certified, they take tests. Chances are that the certified ones are working for courts, they're working for pay. And as advocates, we tend to look for volunteers. So more often than not, you're looking for a qualified one. There are only 12% of translators who are certified, you know, in California, for example. So so what we're left with are people that Spanish is their first language, they don't have formal training, and they have good intentions, but their experience can be, so that's why I'm saying that wherever you get them from, vet them. You know, what's their, how long have they been doing it? What is their background aside from translating and interpreting? And what is their niche? You know, are they used to working in asylum cases? Do they do interview preparations? Is it a specific country over, you know, is it Mexico over Honduras? And once you find a good one, try to keep them around, you know.
Yeah, I'll circle back to
I
this at
think
the,
LinkedIn is a good place to find one too.
I'm sorry,
LinkedIn.
can you put that in the chat? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you, Ernst. Okay, so Najib, I'll ask you this question. Do you notice differences between Zoom and in-person interpretation?
Yeah, in person is, I think, much better. Yeah.
Why?
Because you see all the situation there, and you can express with more confidence. And yeah, so for me, it is like I'm more confident when I talk like personally somewhere. Yeah, I don't know about like others, but I would like to share like my thoughts about finding
Yes,
interpreters.
please, go ahead.
Yeah, if the entity or those organization that they work with immigrants and for a long time, it will be very good that if they can hire someone and train on those areas that it will be needed, like interpretation and like case management. So like back in Afghanistan, we were doing like this, like my position was just like multilingual education and also government relation, and I work for a longer time. But if it is for short term and like specific cases, then it will be very good to have contacts with the local communities. And if you make like contacts and ask them, they will guide you, or they will throw like give you a specific name that who is good in interpretation. And you can like work with them, as we mentioned, that they have to like know the legal terminology, and they have to study law a little bit. And finding that also like participating in some like those country festivals, like cultural events, like as you did in the Afghan dinner. So you will find such kind of talents that they are good in languages. And the other thing is like LinkedIn and Indeed. So you can find out in that as well, like the job announcement, ads, and job search engines. So these will be good places to find interpreters.
So what Najib was referring to is I met him at a local fundraising dinner at a church here in Pittsburgh. And I went up to him immediately after I heard him speak and asked if he would be interested in working with us. And it's been extremely helpful because he personally knows some of the folks that I've represented. And that's really valuable. That's, of course, a double-edged sword, because sometimes if it's someone who like personally knows the client, they might be invested, they might be a little biased. But the flip side of that is that it can be very helpful because the interpreter then is situated to give like background information to me, so I better understand how to zealously represent the client. So that's what Najib was talking about. Yeah, having those kind of like community footprints are super important. And it can also be a reason why you might want to restrict your case types. Like one of the reasons why we are only working Afghan cases right now is because we're extremely small and I really want to do very high quality work. And those cases are expedited. So all of those reasons led me to focus on serving this one community very well, at least for the short term. And when it comes to issues like interpretation, that really, really helps, because if you're helping people from all over the world, it very quickly becomes overwhelming to find interpreters that are really good at what they do. So if you have control over that, that can be nice. Okay, so next question for you, Vera. What common mistakes have you seen that we should avoid as legal advocates?
Well, some of the things that I mentioned earlier, not plan for breaks, not vet the interpreter. But I should say some red flags that I've noticed from both sides now, right? From the case admin side. One of it is when the interpreter shows up in a room and it's clear that there is no privacy. There's noise, there's background noise, there might be a kid or somebody cooking in the back. That is never good, and that gives you a little insight as to the level of professionalism of the interpreter, which is, why I say that one of the things, to speak in advance and set the expectations for the job. The other one is that the interpreter doesn't ask any questions before the assignment. The other one is that the interpreter is not translating in the first person. The minimum, the minimum requirement to translate, the first thing you learn is that you translate in the first person. And when the interpreter starts saying she said, he said, and then also when you notice a lot that she's or he is interrupting the client a lot for that could be a good thing. But if you see that throughout, there's a lot of interruption, that could be a red flag that there is a little problem in understanding. Then again, like I said earlier, the pencil and paper thing, I'm very much a planner when it comes to those things, because I want to do a really good job. And I've never been in the situation that I have not needed to write a term down that I needed clarification, and then perhaps get back to the attorney with, or to make, a drawing of the story of, before and after, and things like that. And the other red flag is when she or he is allowing the client to rattle off for a long time, and then you notice that they are paraphrasing, and that's happening a lot. Not good.
That's helpful. So Najib, do you have anything to add in terms of common mistakes you've seen that we should avoid?
Yeah, like in some cases that the advocates are asking the client that they have to bring like many reason that their case is like strong. I think it will be good to avoid irrelevant or money reason. For example, if someone for like SIV, the special immigrant visa for Afghans, for applicant, if they work with the US government or the US embassy, so that is enough. And but there are people like from minority groups or from different background, and they are like adding that as well. My point is that if they bring one or two, the strong one, and leave the other one, so it will be good, because it will complicate their case when it goes to the court or to the government officials. Yeah. And also some advocates, like they are like just taking from the news, like from BBC, CNN, or something that they heard about like that country. Like my example is about Afghanistan, and they are just copying and pasting that or summarizing that. So that itself make things a little complicated. I think it will be very good to have the general knowledge about that country and what is going on, and also have a little bit research on each person. Yeah, and do not like bring many example like okay, he worked with the US government, he is like from the Hazara community, or he is from the non-Muslim, so that will make things a little complicated.
Okay, so I'm going to transition into more of the legal stuff. So these are questions I've been asked from a legal advocate perspective, but please weigh in, Vera and Najib, because we want to hear your input too. So first, I'm going to put in the chat, I just copy and pasted. This is my bare minimum checklist of instructions I give interpreters before we start. Usually, sometimes it's case specific. So brief overview of what I want to cover. Give your disclaimer about traumatic material, like Vera was talking about. Briefly explain confidentiality, that nothing leaves this conversation, because sometimes people forget or they don't know, particularly if you're dealing with a layperson, because sometimes you have to resort to working with someone with no training, and that's okay. You can get by. I've done that many times, but you just have to educate them. I usually always say, like, hey, if you can translate verbatim, that's ideal. I realize sometimes that's not possible because it's not, particularly with languages that are like more removed from English, like the Afghan languages that have a completely different alphabet, completely different structure, etc. But the goal is to try to get close to verbatim so that the interpreter is not in the role of an advocate for the person, but they're just conveying what the person is saying. First person, like I think Vera mentioned. And I explained to them that I really want to hear everything that the client is saying, even if it's not related to the question I ask, even if it's random, I want to hear it. I want to hear everything they're saying. And I really try to reassure them, like, tell me if I'm going too fast or if I'm asking questions that are too long. I really want the interpreter to feel comfortable to challenge me, because I'm a human and sometimes I miss things or I don't understand why I could be making things harder for the interpreter. I really want them to speak up if I am doing that. So that's kind of the last 2 points there. So those are the bare minimum. Najib or Vera, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's pretty good. And I've seen you in action. So then there are other things, like, for example, if you're in the situation where you have to end a translation, an interpretation job, maybe you can speak about that. When you're noticing that it's not working out, when these things are not being met, when it's not professional, or there's something going on and you have to end it.
Sure, yeah, great point. So this hasn't happened too frequently with me, but I think maybe you're referring to a specific instance in the fall we had an incident where there was real conflict between the client and the interpreter. And what's interesting is ethically, I have responsibilities to my client, right? I have to zealously represent them, their interests. So they're going to take priority over the interpreter for me. But the interpreter was someone that I had a lot of trust in. And so there's some sort of conflict. Honestly, I don't know what happened. I really try to keep an open mind when I do this work, because there's a lot that I can't see. But I know that she was very offended. So basically, I stopped the interview as quickly and as graciously as I could, because I think I owed that to the client, and things were not progressing and I didn't know what was happening. So we stopped the interview, and I apologized to the client that it became too difficult to continue. And then, just to maintain like that personal relationship that I have with the interpreter, because I think she's phenomenal, honestly, I called her afterwards so we could continue that conversation. I could make sure that she was okay, because she was hurt. So there's all sorts of things that can come up, because we're working in like a very tense environment, and people have very different perspectives and sometimes prejudices, you name it. But I think what's important to highlight is your ethical obligation to the client, because that's going to trump everything else, and really should, even if like the client's out of line, that doesn't change your ethical responsibility to them. Okay, so let's see. I think we covered red flags to look for pretty well. Tips on finding interpreters. Okay, so a couple things to add that haven't already been mentioned. Universities can be helpful. There's a lot of foreign language programs if you're in a spot where there are local universities, or universities are willing to do remote work, because of course that's becoming more and more common. Also, I've done this a number of times. I've asked clients if they have someone who's an interpreter, because at least then, even if it's a layperson who doesn't have training, we know they can communicate in one language with them, right? Because it's their recommendation. So as I've mentioned, there's some things to look out for there. Like I've had a lot of family members interpret, and that can be fine. You have to give the instructions, right? And you have to look out for that bias, the person like trying to take over. But it can also be helpful if you are dealing with like traumatic material, and this is a person that your client prefers and feels more comfortable with, that can yield some benefits too. So I would ask the client directly, but it's honestly, it's really challenging, and it's location specific. So when I was working in the DC area, there was a lot available there. Like AUTA had this wonderful language access program. For those of you in that area, I would look into that. But other than that, I would say it tends to be like very unique to where you're located. So I don't want to, most of you are not in the Pittsburgh area, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. But it's tough. A lot of times I will email the AILA listserv as well. Like if you have, like Vera was talking about, a lot of the like indigenous languages in Central America, sometimes you just have to reach out to everyone you know. Like I do that to my blast of immigration lawyers until I can find someone. So you just have to pester a lot of people. Okay, so what to expect at government hearings/interviews. I think this is super important. So at the asylum office level, when it's just an interview, it's not a court hearing, the client generally has to bring their own interpreter with them in person to the interview. There are exceptions to that, but generally that's the rule. And then the government has a monitor that listens into the whole interview to make sure that the interpreter is interpreting correctly. So that's the way it works at the asylum office interview. So give your interpreter a heads up, because that's kind of stressful for them, they're like being monitored actively. And then in a court context, there is a court interpreter provided. So you need to be aware of like making sure the court knows the right language, right? Particularly if it's a rare language like Vera was talking about, you need to make sure that that person will be scheduled. So that's something you would mention at a master calendar hearing, for example, before the individual hearing is scheduled. But you have to also remember, like, if you don't speak your client's language, then you need to bring an interpreter with you that day, or at a minimum have them available on the phone so that you can still talk to your client as the trial is progressing, like when you're having a break. Because a lot of times, like, a judge will say to you, okay, I want to cut testimony down. You need to address X, Y, Z. So of course you need to be able to communicate that to your client. And then obviously at the end of the trial, you want to have a Q&A time so they understand, like, next steps. So you need to bring your own interpreter for that. Let's see. I know there was one more here. Okay. Suggestions about, like, professionals versus non-professionals, like lay folks. Honestly, I think you work with what you have in this field. Like, I am very willing to take chances if, say I have a client that's like a very high risk case, right? If it's a high risk case, then there's all these other barriers that come with it, right? Usually language barrier is one of them. And so I'm very willing, just personally, to try things out, like with someone who has no training, who's a friend or just random connection to the client or myself, whatever, and then see how things go. I don't think you need to work with a professional, but it's obviously beneficial to have someone who's like certified, who has training. Like Vera was saying, like, credentials are very, very helpful. You're going to get higher quality. It's just, I know for me personally, like, I'm not willing to make that be a barrier or a reason why I reject a case, because I personally just have a heart for folks who are more vulnerable because of these very problems. But I think, especially as you're starting out and you're new and you're trying to get your bearings, having higher standards can be helpful because you're not necessarily situated yet to understand, like, what these red flags look like. Whereas, like, if you've been doing this for a couple years, then you kind of know, like, okay, there's a breakdown in communication. This client is not understanding my questions. So I would say, like, the earlier you are in your advocacy, the more it makes sense to have higher standards with interpretation, because you just don't know what to look for yet. You kind of learn as you go. So I think that's it for the legal questions. Let me just check the chat. And feel free to unmute yourself too if you have follow-up questions for Vera or Najib. Okay, great question. What is the best way to get some cultural background info when you encounter new languages, people from other countries you've not worked with before? Can we ask the interpreter for tips while we provide context of the meeting/call? So yes, absolutely. So interestingly enough, in this training series, one of the topics we wanted to cover was whatever words you want to use to describe, like, cultural humility, working with people who, come from a different world than you do. And one of the reasons why I didn't incorporate that into this is because I don't like stereotyping, and I didn't want to do that. Because it's like, people from all over the world are completely different individuals, right? But one thing I do personally is, if I feel like there's a disconnect, I'm not understanding something, I ask interpreters all the time. Like, can you tell me what it's like, particularly if it's someone from, like, the same region? Can you give me some insight? Like, for example, I had a client who was not very responsive about a year ago. And I asked her, hey, would it be okay if I came to your home to do your interview? Because she had no transportation. She has 5 kids. She's a single mom, works all the time. So I just figured that would be easier for her. Long story short, she wasn't, like, responding to my texts to try to schedule. So I called an interpreter who's also a friend from the same part of Afghanistan. And I said, would it be weird if I showed up? Because in America, I think that's weird. I wouldn't like my lawyer coming to my house. And her advice was, no, Jen, like, in Afghanistan, it's a much friendlier and more communal place. Like, people come and they stay the whole day and they give you no notice. I remember that's what she said to me. So I felt a lot more comfortable doing that. This is unconventional. I'm not recommending that you all do this. We were able to make it work, and she won her case. But the point is, like, I find that very, very valuable to go to your interpreter for that kind of questioning, because I think they can give you good insight that really no one else is situated to give you. Okay, can you record or video the interview? Yes, just get their consent. And be mindful of the fact that it can make things more uncomfortable for your client, especially, possibly the interpreter. But it can be helpful for you because it takes pressure off in terms of note taking. So I would just weigh those factors before you do that. Do the interpreters sign a confidentiality agreement? So you can do this to kind of cover yourself. It's not a necessity ethically to have them sign a confidentiality agreement. I would just at a minimum verbalize it so that you covered your bases. Let's see, I think that's all the questions. Vera Najib, any closing remarks, cautionary tales you want to share with us?
An important thing that I forgot to mention when you are vetting or looking for an interpreter is to consider gender. In many cultures, it's really important. So especially with people that have been through trauma. So that's something to put on the checklist.
Great point, absolutely.
Yeah, you covered very well. It was very informative for me as well. One thing I would like, there is a story I would like to share. Like in 2010, when the United States and other NATO soldiers were engaged in the south, especially in Kandahar. In Kandahar, mostly it's spoken Pashto, but it has its own variety. The interpreter went to for search. So they asked in Pashto that are you Talib? Ayata Talibiye, are you Talib? In Pashto, yeah mean no. He said yeah. So he was jailed and he was brought to Bagram. It was a big base. So like after 3 years, when the investigation was like in the court, there was investigation, and they find out, okay, that what was the reason that he is brought to jail. And they find out that, okay, the interpreter made this mistake. So yeah mean no in the Pashto variety, and he thought that it is like yeah in English, and he said yes. So
Wow.
as you mentioned that communication like accurately and the law, it is very important, and so this was a story that I would like to share. Yeah, to have like the justice, to both to the client or someone who is charged, and also the time that the court or the advocate are spending. So it is very important to have a clear and to the point, accurate communication.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that, Najib. Well, Vera and Najib, thank you so much for your insight. We really appreciate it. This was helpful. And everyone else, thank you for coming. And if I didn't get to your question, just shoot me an email and I'll respond. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. And
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for doing this.
Of course.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Jen.